So I think just and ask that topic around committees that was proposed here by Betty be included in a work plan. Work session, not in a work plan. You don't have to add that to the work plan, work session.
So, and the intention is to include task forces. The intention of the list that Chelsea just referred to, Long Range Planning Committee, Budget Committee, and High School Task Force was specifically.
Okay.
And I believe I clarified I'm not looking for a board member on that task force, but I will bring information back to the board.
So I think the suggestion was that Dr. Ludwig and I would fill this out, and we will include that as an early topic. Okay. All right. Go ahead.
Just to clarify, some of these committees might be meeting soon. And so, for example, if I am meeting with Three Rivers Charter School to get the year going, would you like me to reach out to you or someone who's interested before the formal appointment of liaisons?
Before September 18th?
We could.
So I would suggest that in the interim you continue, if there is an existing board member who played that role, that they would continue to fulfill that role. Is that fair?
That's my wonder, and if there's agreement with that, we could certainly work that way until the new liaisons are identified.
I think that sounds good. I was kind of wondering, because I've been the liaison to the Long Range Planning Committee, and there's a meeting coming up, and so I planned on attending, so it's nice just to have this discussion and say that's the expectation, and I plan that we continue in that role until we have our work session and until further notice. Getting legislative updates.
Okay. Let's move to page, help me out.
48.
48.
So in the spirit of our new district goal number 3 of bringing in the community, I put together a wish list of sorts of resolutions that I'd like the board to pass after some discussion. And obviously happy to hear feedback. This is my creation. I expect that when I bring it to you, there will be some different ideas, and that's fantastic. I do want to clarify that I know there have been prior discussions about the legal adequacy of the minutes. These are not designed to meet some legal requirement, but simply to provide the community with a much better understanding of what we do and how we do it. There's a couple of these on the second page that I've spoken to Kathy about most of these things, and after speaking with her, I'm less committed to the ones on the second page about changing the meeting times to 7 p.m. and rotating locations of the board meetings, and we've also discussed some challenges with a Facebook page. But I'd be interested in hearing others' thoughts on those things. And so I'm happy to take these up however the chair thinks is best. We can take them one at a time.
I have no opinion on that.
Okay. Well, then if anyone has an opinion, I'll take them up in any order that, okay. I want to start with the very last one on page 49. And by the way, these are resolutions. I've also been told that's not normally how the board does things, so I don't care that the format that this takes, if we call it resolutions or something else. This is just the format that I chose, being unfamiliar with board custom. Anyways, the last one says, resolved that the code BDDG section 4 shall be amended to read, quote, minutes shall record all motions and actions taken by the board, close quote. It currently states that minutes shall be as brief as possible. And I don't think the goal of the minutes should be as brief as possible, but to provide an adequate detail of what happened in our minutes. So I'll throw that out there for discussion.
Hearing no discussion.
Oh.
Yeah.
So I think that the statute requires that minutes include the viewpoints of all participants, the substance of any discussion, as well as the information upon which a governing body relies upon in making their decisions. So I think those are three very important elements. So I'm not advocating that the policy be amended to include those, but I mean, ideally they would.
Mm-hmm.
But I think eliminating minutes shall be as brief as possible is a great start. And just, I think I just want to commend you for taking on this challenge and for advocating for greater transparency and accountability. So, you know, I'm very supportive of that particular resolution, particularly when it's that the policy itself is backed up with a reference to the statutory requirements, including viewpoints, substance, and information relied upon.
Well, and that's another question we can answer here today is, this is the only amending to the board rules that I put in here. And so my understanding is that we don't need to amend the board rules to kind of direct some of these changes, but if somebody thinks we should amend the rules in addition to discussing them here, I mean, I'm open to hearing about that too.
Could you say that one more time?
Yes. So as a new board member, I'm not sure if in order to accomplish these things, best practices would be to amend the rules or simply to pass resolutions that direct the secretary where appropriate to maybe change the way things are done.
In this instance, I think it's appropriate to amend the policy.
So in terms of process for a board, it looks like you're now moving into some policy work, and that was not mentioned in the agenda. And I know that that's often brought up around the agenda, really reflecting what the board is going to work on, so that members of the community could be present. Certainly, I think bringing it forward as a topic and then maybe having it at the next board meeting very clearly that we're going to be working on a policy. That's how we operate as a staff when we're bringing a policy forward to the board. Even if it's going to require an edit or an update, it is written into the board agenda so that the public knows policy work is going to be conducted by the board that evening. And then the board has the opportunity to do a first read and an adoption that night, or a first read consideration and an adoption at the next meeting if more information is needed. Again, this is not a reflection on that this work shouldn't be managed or worked on, but I'm just trying to bring back to, again, transparency, process, and what the public might expect if there's some work on policy tonight.
For clarification, did the public get this document in the packet of information that was provided for the retreat, or had they come to the retreat, would they have received it? I'm of two minds. I think perhaps if we're going to change the policy, then that would be appropriate for notice. I think otherwise it was very clear that we're working on board goals. This is, in my opinion, a clear board goal, supporting the board goals that we spoke about tonight regarding communication.
I do think it is the practice and procedure that we usually address policy issues in our formal board setting with it noticed, and it's usually referenced. I do think that changing policy to a board session, that's not a huge hurdle. We can still address the content, which is what Dylan is ultimately after, is changing the content of how our meeting minutes are captured. And I think that's a valid discussion we can have here right now. And then, direct our secretary according to the outcome of that discussion here.
And that was my intention, is you're having the conversation now, and then you could direct that at the next meeting, the policy amendment be brought forward for vote, and then the public would know that a policy is being amended.
So I have a question. I naively assumed that what materials that I was viewing were the same materials that were made available to the public. How do I know what the public receives versus what I receive? Is there a separate public board book that I can access to see what they're looking at versus what I'm looking at? Okay. Okay. I thought that I had made clear that I wanted to include it on the agenda, and I should have done a better job to make sure that it was more clear on the agenda. But it's a moot point, I think, because if the board members feel that these need to be drafted in amendment form, then that obviously isn't going to happen, probably while we're sitting here.
Right, Ginger has expressed that she feels like we need to amend the policy. I don't, maybe we do, maybe we don't, but it doesn't stop us from having a discussion about how we would like to see our minutes and the content thereof. And, so they're kind of two different things. Mm-hmm. We can come full circle and really, and clean up policy if ultimately we decide we need to change the policy, but doesn't preclude the discussion as well as an ask about content of meeting minutes. And based on what you said, I mean, I feel like the words are semantics a little bit, but it's really the content of you are looking for a certain content in our meeting minutes. And, I'm interested in hearing what that is, because then we can have a discussion about how doable that is. I mean, how, what the work that goes behind that the secretary has to do after the fact, and how we can make that work. This just saying meeting minutes shall record all motions and actions taken by the board. I get the motions part, all actions, yes. But when I read that, I feel like our meeting minutes do encompass both motions that are made and the action taken by the board. But I assume you would like something more than that.
That language is already in that section. It's being changed to remove language, not add language.
Okay.
Right.
Right, and then you wanted to get rid of the bare minimum or the bare, correct.
Right.
I understand, I hear that.
Yeah.
I still don't, from a content perspective, my question is then, what do those meeting minutes necessarily look like? Because if we're just trying to make sure that we've recorded motions and action taken by the board, I would say that, hey, that's exactly what our current meeting minutes record. Right. So you're after something more than that, I would assume.
I am. I'm after, I think, 17 resolutions. I mean, taken by itself, that would be fairly vacuous, I agree. As to what they would look like, I included in the materials on page 57 a copy of Lake Oswego's minutes, which I think do a much better job than we do of keeping track of the minutes. I think this is being brought because I think our minutes do a fine job. If you sat through the meeting, you know what the minutes talk about. But if you weren't at the meeting and you want to be brought up to speed by reviewing the minutes, I don't think our current minutes do that as well as they should. And so that's the primary objective of those that deal with the minutes. But not all of these are just about minutes. There's other issues in here as well.
No, incorrect. I guess you started with that, and so I was like, all right, so let's have that discussion and see if we can address that. And I guess maybe is your ask at the moment, hey, just that we change the wording of the policy, or is it that then our meeting minutes a different characterization? And I'm guessing that you're asking both, and so I was going towards the second. Well, okay, so what do those look like? Because that's the discussion we have. Because then I will know, like, okay, I agree with that. That's a great idea. Or
Well, I don't know if you had a chance to read these, but many of the resolutions are very specific. You know, for example, when someone from the community speaks, it will identify them by name and what organization they're with, and a brief summary of what they discussed. So there's that, and also the Lake Oswego minutes do an exceptional job of doing just that. So the resolutions tried to kind of lay out the instructions, and I tried and provided a set of minutes I think provide a really good example of what that looks like as a starting point.
So I did want to make a point that I think one of the things that your proposed resolutions would do is assure that materials that are provided to the board are also available to the public. And so I think that the fact that these materials weren't part of the board book is just kind of illustrative of that issue. And it's my understanding that what we're doing right now is going through, discussing the concept of the resolution. And again, I'd like to say that particular provision, I hope that we can proceed with that provision as part of the resolution. And I also wanted to add that the proposed resolution specifically identifies Portland, and I'm glad you attached Lake Oswego's, because I think they're a terrific example of including the substance of the discussion, including board members. On page 60, it includes a reference to what every board member's comments were on a particular issue. For example, on page 60, Mr. Wallen believes that, and then went on. So I hope that in addition to the Portland example, that we do refer to the Lake Oswego example.
Well, I would like to table this discussion because my expectations that the community had some notice of this and that they had received a copy of this was incorrect. And so I want to make sure everyone has a chance to review these. The only issue that I would ask that we take up tonight is decide whether or not it makes sense to translate these and propose amendments to the rules, or if it's adequate in this format.
So I disagree. I think that what I'd like to see happen is that we establish what we can agree on, and then it is put out before the next meeting, and we vote on it there. But that there's no reason we can't discuss it and at least know what we have common ground on. Is there a problem with that?
So, I'm going to come back to the last one, Dylan, since you did start with that. And I think there may be an opportunity to look at some other sample language that other districts have used to try and describe what they're looking for in terms of the depth or content of minutes, so that it's not just a simple removal of one that doesn't seem to also fulfill, but it might better describe what the board is looking for in how minutes are captured and displayed for the public to understand what occurred, and to have that archive and record of motions and actions, so that, ultimately this then lands with staff around making sure that we have real clarity on what the board is expecting to see. It might take us a few months was this enough? Was this enough? But I think, again, having at least a portion of the policy better worded here. And so it might be worth gathering some sample language that seems to express what we're trying to get at. And then that policy edit will have exactly what we want to capture in there.
Well, I want to be careful that we're not making perfect the enemy of the good. We can make changes quickly and continue to tinker with them over the months. But I don't want to wait 6 months before we put any changes in place. I think people are hungry for change, and some of these things are simple enough that we can move on them, I would hope, relatively quickly.
Are you meaning all of these resolutions or the last one?
As many as we can come to a consensus on.
There are a number in here that require, that I could already foresee requiring quite a bit of conversation and perhaps even some work with legal counsel on, so.
And which ones are those?
We want to think about video. We've worked with legal counsel on that before and want to just make sure that, you know, we kind of have an understanding around that. Is this exactly the same as the one you had before? Or is this different?
I've had revisions, so I don't know if
Oh,
it's exactly the same
okay.
you saw before.
Okay, then I should read it again. I wasn't sure if it was exactly the same as an earlier draft.
There may be changes to it.
Oh, okay.
The only one that I'm not
When you
prepared
mean
to say
code, you mean
we should
policy,
implement
right?
is the Facebook one. And that was just a result of conversations that I heard at the school board conference that raised concerns.
All right, well, we'll dive in, and I'll start off at the top instead of the bottom. First one, resolve that the board's meeting minutes will be written in such a way that they be readily understood by the general public and avoid using jargon, abbreviations, or other terms without adequate explanation. Any thoughts on that?
Makes sense to, I mean, if you're having minutes so that people can understand what you're talking about, that's fine. But then again, it kind of leads to, to what extent are you recording the content of, you know, like what's actually being shared, or are you adding now meaning to what's being shared? So, and I don't know, you know, if I'm rattling off a few acronyms, or, you know, I'm just, for example, I'm just thinking out loud, if I'm rattling off acronyms and the board secretary or whoever's doing our meeting minutes then goes through and, you know, adds definitions to those that may or may not have gone in the direction I was contemplating. You know, you're now changing content potentially of a speaker. So I guess, you know, to what extent are you wanting to record the actual board members' thoughts versus embellishing them to give further explanation of what that board member's trying to?
So if this is intent, then that's something we do when we approve minutes or we amend minutes at the next meeting. Say, that wasn't what I was talking, that wasn't what I said, that wasn't what I was talking about, or, hey, I see that we didn't define SO, whatever, and then we make those changes when we do approval of minutes.
Yeah. I mean, yes, that's one way of addressing it. But the idea is, your board secretary is trying to, I mean, the idea is that we're trying to give direction to our secretary so that she could be consistent across the board, and so that she doesn't feel like we're always correcting her best efforts to meet our needs. I'm just saying, like, I just could see a little bit of potential contradiction in the two things you're trying to
Well, and
achieve.
this isn't directed at rewriting people's presentations. It's when, you know, when MAP comes and speak, you don't write MAP, you write Music and Arts Partners. Just really simple things like that, you know, somebody who's not here every day would be helpful to have them read it and understand it. So I'm looking at changing words and abbreviations, not entire paragraphs or anything like that. I mean, it discusses using, you know, abbreviations and terms, not anything longer than, you know, single words. Is there a change to it that you would like that would?
No,
help?
I'm just
Okay.
trying to make sure we're being as clear as possible, because we are asking people to act upon it. So no.
Okay, anything else on that, or shall we move to the next one?
I think from a process standpoint, if there is consensus on, you know, moving towards ensuring that this is then we achieve consensus on it and we move on, versus trying to get this whole document of consensus on every item and then you just basically pass the document, because I think that might have more pitfalls. But if this particular item,
Okay,
okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
number 2.
That when board meeting minutes refer to an individual speaker by name, the minutes will, when applicable, identify the organization on behalf of whom the speaker is presenting and the position, if any, the speaker holds within said organization. I wrote this one because in going through our old minutes, there were speakers I had no idea who they were, and after asking around, for example, I found out that in one instance they were high school students that were speaking. They were speaking from some organization that was speaking at the meeting, but from my perspective, I didn't know who these people were, and so it would just be a really easy way to help make the minutes clearer.
Okay. This on that? Okay.
Be it resolved that when a member of the public speaks at a board meeting, the meeting minutes will reflect a brief summary of the speaker's purpose for speaking. The brief summary should, if applicable, include a statement as to what side of the spoken on issue the speaker falls. This was written because there are minutes that list names of like 12 individuals that came and spoke with nothing that says what they spoke on. And I think it's a matter of respect that if somebody takes the time to be here, we can give them one sentence that says what they were here for. And it also gives a barometer, too, of, if it's a contentious issue, 12 people show up on one side of the issue and no one shows up on the other side of the issue. I think that's important to reflect as well. That's the thinking behind that.
And this may help me as I'm speaking with the public. Note that if they're able to identify what they want the board to do as a result of their comments, that is part of what we're hoping for. A more detailed outcome.
And that's not stated here, though, right?
No, I'm
You're not
saying if
seeing
we
that, reading
adopt
that in
this,
here.
then I'm able to communicate that to maybe persons who come on a regular basis. That it would help us in taking our minutes to know.
One thing that's catching me a little bit is just the time, and I'm happy to stay past 9:30 if that's group conscious, and that's what we want to do. But we are like 5 minutes away from deciding to close. Also, I think this is a valuable discussion about minutes. I was not privy to the earlier discussions that the board had around it. So for me, it's a bit of a new topic. I know it's one that has history, but one that I'm happy to participate in currently. I think one of the blocks I have just conceiving of this as a resolution is my understanding of resolutions being a declaration of values. I think of the resolution that was passed by Clackamas County Commissioners around their inclusive communities, and it wasn't a directive for staff at how to enact things. It was more of a declaration of values, a higher level, whereas a board action would be, to make a motion, to, get in a directive. So that's, I think, one of the things is just as we go through this is a framework for discussing what we want from the minutes, is how I'm understanding it, more than an editing of a resolution. So that's kind of where I'm thinking, almost going back to this idea of it sounds like we're choosing to reopen the discussion of minutes. We've started that discussion and we've made some agreements on what that would look like around not having jargon, not having abbreviations, including statements about what people speak to and things of that nature. We have a couple of samples and we have a proposed amendment to a policy. So I see those as distinct discussions around a board action or directive for how we want minutes to be taken, and then a proposal to revisit a policy around it. Am I understanding this correctly? Versus going through line by line on something which is loaded with essentially directives.
I'm confused why we can't take whatever form of action we need to take. I've said the only thing I have disagreement with is a Facebook page. Dr. Ludwig identified videos as something we probably want to address with legal counsel. Is there anything else we can't just say as a board, these are things we want to implement?
I think to paraphrase that, I mean, this stuff seems super non-controversial to me. And so maybe an easier way of doing it would be, instead of going through each one, discussing what issues or questions people have about them. That might speed things up.
And that, I would concur with that. I'd like to see a bold statement about accountability and transparency. And I think that the proposed resolution does that. If we can address it through by exception, that might be faster. But I support what you've proposed.
All right, so is there any exceptions that members would take to this content?
I appreciate that there is language that, Dylan, you did include where you said would strive to prepare meeting agendas. I think that speaks to our effort is always to get things to you as soon as possible. And we also know that sometimes the world out there doesn't have the same timing as when our meeting lands. So I think in the spirit of understanding that, the word strive is really helpful there. I will say that getting minutes from an evening back within 2 days may be something that I would, out of courtesy, wish to, talk to Kelly about. And there's a process around typing what she can here, and then it sounds like there's now expectation for identifying or removing some jargon or spelling some things out. And then she does also have, Kathy Monroe reviews all the minutes, has another set of eyes looking at it. And if this were Kelly's only job to record minutes and she had nothing to do the next day, it may be easier to do that. So I'm wondering if in the spirit of, again, kind of a striving, instead of the language of will distribute, but, we'll work towards distributing unofficial minutes, and, helping us to not have such a time-bound 2 days. Otherwise, there may be times when we just may need to contract that service to multiple people helping with. I just think about even, this was 8 hours.
Yeah, so I've
a lot to
included
review.
strive to after will before distribute.
Considering this idea that we would, should a representation of our viewpoint be documented, that we have an opportunity to revise that when we approve it. That's, I could see some concern around an unofficial. What is the objective, I guess, of doing that?
Other districts use unofficial minutes. The problem with official minutes is they're so good, they take a long time. And so the community doesn't get to see them for an extended amount of time. And usually unofficial minutes are pretty darn close to the actual minutes, that it's kind of a cost-benefit analysis. Is it worth the community waiting 2 to 3 weeks to get minutes for changing 4 or 5, words?
That makes sense. And we have video. We do have video.
Right, but I mean, the videos of this meeting is going to be very lengthy. People aren't going to want to sit through.
Want to watch that?
Yeah.
I do think that, I don't like the idea of distributing unofficial minutes because content hasn't been
So
approved.
let's put
like,
that off
is-
for further discussion.
I do think they could be clearly marked as draft, identified as draft.
So the reason I'm pushing this, I want to hear what you have to say,
Differently.
but we are at 9:31, and I'm wondering if we can't decide what we're not going to decide on and decide what we're going to decide on, and then have that discussion at the next.
I'm feeling like pressured to hurry up and make decisions, which has not been like this whole night. We've been pretty good at coming together and discussing things, and I think that this is important content, but I'm not comfortable. I mean, if you push me, I'm going to say no to all of these because I just would like to have, it will make me feel better if we have this discussion and I'm understanding I'm on the same page with you.
I just want to be clear then.
There is consensus to be had, but to try and, speed this up. And there's not a lot, still left to discuss, but I need to have that discussion to feel comfortable.
So just to be clear, is it your position then that you want to discuss every single resolution as a group?
I mean, I want to touch on it and be like, what is it you're after? Yeah, I do want to, I do. I'm not going to, yeah, correct. Discussion may be very short, but yeah, I'd like to.
I'd like to float a motion. I'd like to make a motion that the board approve the concepts that are embodied in the proposed resolution, West Linn-Wilsonville School Board Resolution approving policies regarding board meetings, and approve them in concept, request Dylan to work with the superintendent and include the matter on the August 14th board meeting agenda.
I'll second that motion.
Concept, what does that mean?
That approve them as drafted and as modified by the discussion, so that Dylan and Kathy can work together on modifications that we consider at our next meeting.
But then again, I'm so sorry, but why would we approve something that isn't in an approved state? Why would we not just request that Dylan and Kathy get together, please work through this, and then bring it to us to then discuss?
Okay, it's been moved and seconded.
So then this is the discussion. The motion is, she's making a motion to approve something that's not in a final state and that is not approved and that is just a concept. The board's being asked to approve something that's in concept, subject to change. That's not something a
This
part of which you
has
would
been part of the materials that were provided to the board for the board retreat. It was well understood that transparency and communication with the public, as provided by my explanatory letter to the board, would be part of our discussion under board goals.
And I'm not disagreeing with that. I'm just saying, like, there is a motion to approve a document that's not in its final stage. I mean, you're being asked to approve something that now is going to change, and then you're going to come back and revisit it. From a process standpoint, it's ridiculous to make a motion on something that's not even set, that's not done. The clear intent is to approve a document that's going to change.
I think the motion was to approve in concept the resolutions. Request Dylan and Kathy to work together on some proposals as reflected by this discussion for inclusion as an agenda item at the next board meeting, at our August 14th board meeting.
So I'm wondering, maybe we can think about this. The title says approving policies regarding board minutes, but there is only one policy that we're referencing, right, at the very end. So I'm wondering if Dylan and I could work on, maybe we'd call it guidelines or operating principles for board meetings that would encompass these ideas, bring those forward to the board as a document that has these guiding principles or operating agreements around board minutes, because I don't hear people disagreeing with the content. They still want to have some conversation. And then there is one at the end, which is a policy that we want to then bring forward. So when we put the agenda together for the next board meeting, there would be discussion around the operating or the guidelines with then an amendment to a policy. And therein would be, maybe that would be helpful. So it wouldn't feel like an adoption of multiple resolutions, but an agreement around guidelines for minutes, how they should read, and all the things you've discussed, and an adjustment to one policy.
And I think, Betty, and correct me if I'm wrong here, the motion wasn't about approving it. It was, sending a message to the community that this is a priority and that while we don't agree on the details of it, we endorse the spirit of it, which is that this is an effort to bring more openness to the board.
And I do think that Kathy's last comments are consistent with the motion, which would be for Dylan and Kathy to come up with a proposal for us to consider at our next meeting.
So maybe that's all that the proposal is, that we would work together to take these ideas as discussed tonight and create or put together them back to the board.
I think, yeah, I hear that there's traction around talking about minutes. There's interest in it. I support the idea. Dylan has brought forward a lot of thought in this, and so I support the idea of working closely with you for you all to propose something. I can't vote yes on the motion because as I understand the motion to be is to approve this in concept, but there are a handful of things that I would strike that I in concept can't approve of, such as, the Facebook page and, some of the things around video that would require legal counsel. So I'll vote no on the motion, but in spirit, support continuing the discussion and being open to further information presented about what we're deciding to do.
I mean, what I hear from the board is we'd like a change with how the minutes are done. And we're agreeable, we're happy to make that happen. So I think now it's just around making sure that at the next meeting, they do reflect the discussion from tonight as well as the intentions that are continued in the ones that we haven't discussed. Because I've heard people reference ones that they're fine with removing, and maybe we would work on just removing those and bring back a revised list.
And I'll clarify, this goes beyond minutes. There's other resolutions here that it's not just meeting minutes.
So let's call the vote.
Can you just state the motion one more time so I'm very clear on what I'm voting on?
Approve the resolution in concept.
Can you call the vote then?
Aye.
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 No.
No.
Okay. We did good work. Probably not the best note to end on, but that's okay. I look forward to the next meeting. You are not going to get an agenda a week in advance, I don't think, but we'll get that to you as soon as we can. We know what our next work session is going to be. Anything else?
I think you did a fantastic job today, Ginger. It was your first board meeting and chairing it. It was pretty impressive.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, it was good work.
That's right. Legal counsel will be present at executive session as well. And thank you, you had asked us about that. I have to look at my schedule.
I'm flexible. I will be calling in. I'm going to be not in the city vicinity, but I will call in for as much of the meeting as I can, beginning at 5 or 5:15, whatever time you all tell me.
I'm flexible. So what time would you like us to start, Dr. Ludwig?
For the executive session. Kelly.
All right, so the retreat on this meeting is adjourned, and we will see you next week. Thank you.